Let's take a look at the animation screen. Please note that this tutorial was created on an iPad Pro using Animation Pro version 1. Your screens may look a little different. You can get to the animation screen by tapping on an existing project. If you don't have any projects yet, or simply wish to create a new one, then start by tapping on the blue plus button at the top of the project screen. Then tap on the new project that's been created. This tutorial will cover the main features of the animation screen shown here. Some features will be covered in more depth within other tutorials. Whenever that's the case, a message, like this one, will be displayed. So let's start by taking a look at the buttons at the top of the screen. The first is the back button. Press this button to return to the last screen that you were using. When using the animation screen, this button will return you to the project selection screen. The next button with the plus symbol on it opens the Add menu. Press this button to add items, such as images, text, or audio, into the currently selected frame of your animation. To the right of the Add button is a red button with a minus symbol on it. This button opens a Remove menu and may be used to remove items from the currently selected frame of your animation. Next is a button with a picture of a movie camera on it. Tap on this button to open the virtual camera. The virtual camera may be used to pan, zoom, or rotate your frame. You can even use it to simulate depth of field. The final button on the left-hand side of the screen opens the stop motion camera. When you press this button, the background image in your frame will show a live feed from your device's rear camera. To focus on a specific item in the live feed, tap on it. A shutter button will also appear on the right-hand side of the animation screen. Press the shutter button to take a photo and use it as the background image in the currently selected frame. Please note that whenever you take a photo, Animation Pro will only display it for 2 seconds before resuming the live feed. And when you've finished with the camera, press the button at the top of the screen again to close it. Now over on the top right of the screen is another set of 6 buttons. The first will only appear when changes have been made. It can be used to undo any changes made to the currently selected figure or to the entire frame. The second opens the Animation Pro clipboard. In Animation Pro you can copy figures, background images, entire frames or camera settings into a clipboard. It's important to note that items stored in the clipboard are global. That is, they may either be pasted back into the same animation or into a completely different one. In some cases, such as with background images and camera settings, items may be pasted back into multiple frames at once by tapping on the blue arrows as shown. Here you can select how many frames the item is to be pasted into. Next is a button that opens the Output menu. This is where you'll go to export your animation, save a figure, preview the current frame, or view the last video export. I'll talk more about this later. The button with the picture of the cog on it opens the Animation Screen Options menu. This menu provides a number of items that control how frames are added, set the orientation of the stop motion camera, and configure the onion skins, etc. I'll cover the items in this menu as I demonstrate the features of the animation screen. The button with the picture of the spanner on it may be used to open the Create Crop menu. This menu provides access to the other main screens within Animation Pro, such as the Figure Editor and the Image Creator. Finally, the last button at the top right of the screen opens the Animation Pro Help. There's nearly 500 pages of help to be found in there, covering all aspects of Animation Pro, so please check it out. Okay, so that's a quick tour of the buttons at the top of the screen. The main part of the screen below that displays the contents of the current frame that you're working on. Right now, it contains a background image that I shot using Animation Pro's stop motion camera. Alternatively, I could have selected an image from my iPad. I can do that by pressing the plus button at the top of the screen to open the Add menu. From the Add menu, I'll then select Background Image or Video. Animation Pro will open its file manager to display all of the images in your iPad's photo library. Please note, the first time you do this, iOS will ask if Animation Pro should be granted access to your library. If you'd like to access the assets in your photo library, select Yes, and then tap on the Photo/Video Albums category again to refresh the File Manager display. Okay, I'll quickly select the photo now. Next, I'll open the Add menu again and select Figure. This time, the File Manager will display all of the figures that I've created. Animation Pro, however, comes with a number of pre-installed figures to get you started. You'll also find all of the figures that come packaged with stick motion animation in there as well. In this case, I'm going to select one of the included Animation Pro figures. That's better. Now we've got something to look at. Using 2 fingers, you can drag the frame around. You can also use 2 fingers to zoom in and out on the frame. Please note that this won't affect your exported animation at all. It's just a means of taking a better look at the items in your frame. To quickly reset the frame back to its normal state, press the Reset button at the bottom left corner of the screen. Now, as I've just alluded to, the bottom of the animation screen has a number of additional buttons and controls. So let's now take a look at those. The big dark area in the middle will ultimately display a film strip representation of your animation. In other words, it will display a thumbnail image for each frame in your animation. In this case, I only have 1 frame, and I've made changes to it. So we currently see a single box with a green tick in the middle of it. Whenever you see a tick on the film strip, that means that the frame has been modified, but not saved as yet. To save the frame, you can tap on the green tick. Alternatively, you can press the large blue plus button over here. By default, this button will not only save the frame, in this case frame 1, it will also create a new frame and open it for editing. So I'll press it now. So now I have 2 frames, where the second is a copy of the first. Now, animating is all about creating slightly different frames, so that when they're all played back in quick succession, it appears as if, for example, a character is moving. So let's adjust the figure a little in frame 2. In Animation Pro, all figures have an orange anchor point. This is the point about which the figure will scale, rotate, or shear. You can select a figure by tapping on its anchor point. When you do that, the anchor point will flash green and orange so that it's easy to see which figure has currently been selected. Red handles for all of the flexible items in the figure will also be displayed. You can move the entire figure around by dragging its anchor point. You can move one of the items within the figure by dragging its red handle. Some items, such as the figure's tie, may be stretchable and/or bendable as well. So I'll now proceed to add a few more frames, changing the figure a little bit each time. At this point, you can see that a bunch of additional thumbnails have been added to the film strip. I can quickly open one of the other frames by tapping on its thumbnail. The first frame has the figure in a really bad position. I can remove the frame by swiping up on its thumbnail to reveal and then press a red delete button. Please note that if I press the big blue plus button now, a new frame will be inserted into the animation. Now, the number of thumbnails on the film strip will ultimately exceed the number that can be displayed at once. When that happens, you can swipe the film strip left and right to reveal additional thumbnails. You can also use the slider at the bottom of the screen to quickly locate a frame in a large animation. By default, Animation Pro will display a scrubbing preview as you do that. The scrubbing preview can be a useful way to preview parts of your animation. If, however, you don't wish to see the scrubbing preview, you can always turn it off in the Options menu, as shown. I should also mention that Animation Pro will display information about the currently selected frame at the top of the screen. You can use this whilst scrubbing to locate a specific frame. Again, there's an option available to configure what's actually displayed there. You can choose to view either the frame rate and frame number, or alternatively, the frame number
its position in the animation measured in seconds, and the overall length of the animation in seconds. Of course, scrubbing is not really an ideal way to preview a large animation. To see a better preview, press the play button at the bottom right corner of the animation screen. Here you can preview the animation at different frame rates, or step or scrub through the frames more effectively. Please note, however, that some of the things that you'll add to your animations, such as tweens, automatic lip syncing or positional audio, are only actually calculated and created when your animation is exported. So the quick preview will not show everything. It's only intended to be an instant, high-level preview of your animation. And whilst I'm on the subject of previews, you can also preview an individual frame by selecting Preview Current Frame from the Output menu. This can be useful if you're working in 3D and wish to see a quick anaglyph preview. You can also share a frame as an image from the preview screen. Images shared from the preview screen will include transparency where no background image is present. Now, where was I?
I don't know.
In that case, I'll talk a little bit about onion skins. When animating, it can be useful to see the contents of the previous or the next frame layered over the top of the frame that you're editing. That way you can see just how much you've changed something, such as the position of a figure's arm. Those layers are known as onion skins. I'm guessing because onion skins are layered. Anyway, in Animation Pro you can set up onion skins from the Options menu. Here you can choose the opacity of the onion skin, whether an onion skin for the previous frame is shown, whether an onion skin for the next frame is shown, or whether an onion skin for both the previous and the next frame is shown. In this case, the onion skin for the previous frame will be tinted green and the next frame red, so that you can tell the difference. By default, Animation Pro will display the onion skin sandwiched between the background image and the figures in your frame. Sometimes, however, it can be useful to place the onion skin above everything. You can flip between the two display modes, as shown. Okay, so let's now get into the fun stuff and take a look at all of the things that you can do to your figures. You can press the button with the picture of the magnifying glass on it to open the Figure Inspector. You can use the Figure Inspector to view and/or change all of the properties of the currently selected figure. In this case, the contents of the Figure Inspector are dimmed because the figure hasn't been selected yet. So I'll tap on the figure's anchor point to select it. Now, as with most popovers in Animation Pro, the Figure Inspector can be dragged around the screen by its title bar. The contents of the Figure Inspector are divided into a number of different categories. You can select a different category by scrolling the buttons at the top of the Figure Inspector to find and then select the one that you're after. So let's take a quick tour of the categories and see what you can do. The Transform category allows you to perform basic transformations upon your figure. You can change the size of the figure, flip the figure, rotate the figure, adjust the Z position of the figure, that is, adjust whether the figure appears in front of or behind other figures, and move the figure with more precision than you can do with your finger. All dials in Animation Pro will generally display the value of the given property that they're manipulating. Where that value is enclosed within a border, the value may be tapped to perform a fine adjustment. Most of the controls in the Color category are used to bulk change the colour of the lines and circles in a figure. This can be useful when you're animating stick figures, which I don't have at the moment, so I'll talk more about how these controls work when it comes to tinting figures. The opacity dial at the bottom of the popover, however, may be used to adjust the overall opacity of any figure, as shown. The tint controls work in the same way as the Color controls. Unlike the Color controls, however, you can tint all of the items in a figure, that is, the lines, circles, images, text, or mouths. Tinting also requires a blend mode to be specified. The blend mode dictates how the selected tint colour will be combined with any existing colours in the figure. One of the most common blend modes that you'll use is Multiply, so I'll select that. Now, when I tap on the colour swatch, the figure is tinted the selected colour. Other blend modes produce other effects. If I select Normal, for example, the entire figure turns the selected colour. Now, whenever you select a colour from the swatch, the gradient above it will change, allowing you to select a lighter version of that colour. If you'd like to be a little more accurate with your colour selection, you can also press the small blue button below the colour swatch. This displays red, green and blue dials so that you can select the individual RGB components of a desired colour. Press the small blue button again to return to the swatch. Finally, down the bottom of the figure inspector, you'll see another dial labelled Strength. This allows you to select the strength of the tint, as shown. Please note, applying a colour or a tint to a figure is the same as individually applying the same colour or tint to every item in your figure. So if individual items in your figure have already had colours or tints applied, those colours or tints will be replaced by the selections made here in the figure inspector. I'm now going to skip over 3 categories in the figure inspector to talk about blurs and distortions. If you'd like to find out more about those 3 categories, that is, audio, lip-syncing and tweens, please take a look at the audio and tweening tutorials, as those are big topics in themselves. You can blur a figure by adjusting the dial at the top of the figure inspector. Several of the effects that you can apply to figures, such as blurs and distortions, affect the figure as a whole, rather than each individual part or item in the figure. To achieve this, Animation Pro needs to convert the figure to an image, known as a figure proxy, and then apply the effects to that. In this state, the handles for the individual items in the figure will not be visible. Of course, you may still want to move or adjust the items in the figure after such an effect has been applied. To do that, simply tap on the figure's anchor point. This will hide the proxy and display the figure in its normal state, so that you can continue to work with its handles. And don't worry, the effects are still there, and they'll be reapplied if you select another figure or save the frame. Alternatively, you can press the button with the picture of the stick figure on it to redisplay the figure proxy. Okay, so below the blur dial, you'll find a box containing a blue square with blue handles at each of its corners. You can drag those handles to distort a figure. And finally, if you'd like to completely remove a distortion, simply press the reset button at the bottom of the figure inspector. The Sheeran Scale category contains a series of 4 dials, allowing the X and Y axes of the figure to be independently sheared or scaled. As with highlighting and blurring, these transformations are performed upon a figure proxy. The last category that I'm going to cover in this tutorial is the highlight category. There's one remaining category in the figure inspector called clone, but you guessed it, there's a separate tutorial that covers that topic. Now the highlight category allows you to simulate light falling upon a figure. For the purpose of this demonstration, I've given the figure's hair, shirt and tie some colour so that the highlighting stands out a little better. I'll show you how to do that later in the tutorial. So the first thing that I need to do is specify an amount, that is, how much highlighting should be applied. The other 2 dials allow me to specify the angle at which the highlight is applied to the figure, and its intensity, or just how strong the highlight is. Finally, I can specify the colour of the highlight by tapping on the swatch, tapping on the gradient above the swatch, or by pressing the small blue button to reveal and then set the individual red, green and blue components of a desired colour. Now you may not wish to highlight all of the parts of a figure. Here, the figure's eyes, for example, look a little washed out due to the highlighting. To fix that, I can tap on the handle for the eyes and turn the Allows Highlight switch off. Okay, so that's a quick tour of the transformations and effects that may be applied to a figure. But Animation Pro also allows quite a few adjustments to be made to the individual items within a figure. So let's now take a look at those. To adjust a given item, tap on its handle. This will open an item popover as shown. Now the contents of the item popover will vary based upon the type of item that you've selected. Generally speaking, however, most of the other versions of this popover will be a subset of the one displayed here, so I won't be covering each of them separately. press the first button to adjust an item. This will bring up the item adjustment screen. Please note that whenever you access this screen, Animation Pro will temporarily change the opacity of the other items in your figure, such that the item that you're editing is not obscured. You can adjust the position of the item relative to its handle by dragging one finger across the screen. You can change the size of the item using two fingers. By default, items will be scaled proportionally. If you'd like to scale the item along a single axis only, you can press the buttons as shown to scale the item's x-axis or width, scale the item's y-axis or height, or scale both axes at the same time again. Now the dial below those buttons can be used to adjust the opacity of the item. Please note that the opacity of the figure, as selected in the Figure Inspector, and the opacity of the item are independent. That is, a figure, for example, can have an opacity of 50%, with an item set to 50% of that. Moving across to the right, the top button allows the item to be flipped. The button below that will only appear where the item hasn't been defined in the figure editor as bendable. You can press the button to put the item temporarily into bend mode. Whilst in bend mode, 4 additional blue handles will appear, allowing the item to be bent. Unlike bendable items, items bent here may have their endpoints adjusted. And when you're finished bending an item, press the bend button again to exit bend mode. Directly below the bend button is the tint button. Press this button to tint the item. The final dial on the item adjustment screen will rotate the item. Use the two buttons above the dial to quickly rotate the item 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right. For a precise rotation, press the button in the centre of the dial. Moving further across to the right, you can press the top button to pop up an undo menu and individually roll back any adjustments. If, however, you'd like to set one of the parameters back to a default value, press the button below that and select from the reset menu. Of course, if you want to undo all of the changes that you've made since entering the item adjustment screen, then you can always press the red X button at the top of the screen to abort and return to the animation screen. Otherwise, press the green tick button to accept all of your changes. Now you've probably noticed the 6 switches at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. They control which of the item adjustments will be tweened between this frame and the next. For more information regarding those switches, please watch the tweening tutorial. Let's now take another look at the item popover. The next button can be used to edit an item. This will open the image creator, prompting you to paste the item into a blank canvas for editing. This will give you the chance to resize the item before you begin working on it. Once you're happy, press the green tick at the bottom of the Paste Options panel. Alternatively, you can choose not to paste the item, construct an entirely new image, and have that image placed back into the figure. Whatever the case, once you've finished making your changes, you can press either the red X or the green tick at the top of the screen to return to the animation screen. Pressing the red X will abort the edit, leaving the figure unchanged. Pressing the green tick will insert the changes into the figure as shown. The next button, Clear, provides a quick means of hiding an item in a figure. You may, for example, want to make the character bald. The original button will reinstate the original item image, that is, the one that was saved with the figure. It may also be used to reinstate cleared items. The last button allows a different image to be substituted into the figure via the Animation Pro File Manager. This process is covered in more detail in the Substitutions tutorial. Below the row of buttons, you'll also find 3 switches. As I've already shown, the Allow Highlight switch may be used to suppress highlighting of a given item. The Tween Movement and Tween Bending switches may be used to turn tweening on and off for the movement and or the bending of a given item on the current frame. Again, tweening is covered in detail within the tweening tutorial. So there you go. That was a brief rundown of the animation screen.
Brief?
Yes, brief. And I didn't actually cover everything. So please refer to the integrated help for the items that I've missed here. The stop motion section, for example, will cover some of the remaining options that I've skipped over here. There's also a separate tutorial covering the export process that you may find useful. Thanks for watching.